Hello and welcome everybody. This is the Jan Helfeld Show. We're just waiting for Jan to call into the show here. Today we have guest Larken Rose. Larken, you with us?
Yes, I am.
How you doing, Larken?
Pretty good.
Good. Okay. Yep, just waiting for Jan to give us a call here to come on to the show. I don't know where he's at. Normally he's on his way. Sometimes he does the show from the gym. While he's on a treadmill, so I just don't know. I just don't know where he's at right now, but he is supposed to be doing a show today. All right. So we just come out of the Stefan Molyneux show. Let me just start this chat up here again. Hold on a second here. Get this chat going here for the listeners. And you listen to the Jan Helfeld Show, hosted by Movement Radio. Okay, we've got some listeners here. If you guys want to refresh, please feel free to do so. Just to give while I try and remind Jan he has a show today. Do you just want to give people an insight, Larken, of who you are, where you've been, and your website and your books, if you just want to talk for a couple of minutes while I give Jan a call to make sure he's not forgot about the show.
Sure. In fact, I'll also quick use this opportunity to say a few words of praise for Jan, even if he's not yet here to hear them. I've, since mid-'90s, I guess it started, got into politics, was conservative, libertarian-leaning, and basically slowly inched towards wanting less and less government until I pretty much fell off the edge and said anything called government, anything that actually fits the description of government, is not our friend. It is not in favor of humanity. It is not a civilizing influence. It's not necessary. It's not a necessary evil. It's an unnecessary evil, and we should basically stop believing that any set of rulers, even limited rulers with all these supposed restrictions on them, is a good idea, because it's not. And in the midst of my political stuff, I had fun run-ins with the IRS about a legal issue. My website is larkenrose.com, LARKENROSE.com, and that has my 3 published books. First is How to Be a Successful Tyrant, which is just what it sounds like. It describes how to be a tyrant that can actually oppress people and get away with it, because there are a lot of tricks to it. You can't just do it brutally and openly, because then your peasants figure out what you're doing and they resist. So there's an art form to being an evil, nasty tyrant. Of course, I didn't write the book because I wanted more evil, nasty tyrants. I wrote the book because I wanted their intended victims to see the way these people think and to see through their scams and their tricks of all the ways in which they pull off tyranny by making their victims demand it because they think it's a good idea. Because, I'm just here to protect you and give you free stuff and all those fun tricks. My second book was Kicking the Dragon, and that's about my story with the IRS. Completely different issue, a giant, ridiculous tale that ended in them prosecuting me and me getting convicted by a jury of complete imbeciles. And then I got to sit in prison for a year writing some books, one of which is Kicking the Dragon. And then my new one that just came out is a novel called The Iron Web. And it's been getting rave reviews all over the place inside the movement and outside the movement. It seems to do what I really, really hoped it would do, which is use the medium of entertainment, because it's a fictional story, and lots of people say, wow, the story's really good, and it made me think about things I hadn't thought about before. And so I'm thrilled with that. On my website, I often publish articles from the all-the-way freedom perspective of anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, whatever you want to call it. And I have a regular email list that I send things to, and then on larkenrose.com is my blog, and you can go there and see 2 years worth of my political posts or anti-political posts. And I wanted to mention that a while back I posted a link to one of Jan Helfeld's videos where he was talking to Harry Reid. And he basically was asking, well, when government uses force to take money from one person to give it to somebody else, how's that going to make the person feel who you're taking it from? And Harry Reid never really got around to answering the question because he basically interrupted and said, well, I don't accept your characterization of taxation as force. And so it got into this bizarre discussion of Harry Reid, and Jan would ask him, well, don't we get punished if we don't pay? I mean, you're not saying we can just decide not to and nothing will happen. And Harry Reid tried to dance back and forth between, well, yeah, there are punishments if you don't pay, but it's voluntary. And just completely mangling the language, completely mangling anything resembling logic to try to hide the fact that taxation is forcibly taking somebody's money. And, politicians usually use these euphemisms to cover it up, but to have him come right out and blatantly say both sides of the argument was just hilarious. A similar thing happened in an interview that Jan did with Bernie Sanders, who just would, first of all, he just dodged questions all over the place. You could see these politicians are scared to death to just talk about what they believe, just answer some basic questions about, principles about when is force justified. You and I don't have the right to go to our neighbor and say, we really need something, so you're going to hand over your money or we're going to hurt you. We don't have that right. And if we don't have that right, who gave it to the people in Congress? Who gave it to government? And frankly, I'm amazed that Dan ever got one interview with these politicians, but he's got a ton of them. If you go to youtube.com/Jan Helfeld, JanHelfeld, you can see this big list of, people everybody have heard of, these high-profile people who give him interviews, and he politely asks these simple questions, and eventually they contradict themselves and their heads explode, and they call him names and threaten him and run away. And it's hilarious. It just
threaten to throw him through windows also.
Right, threaten to throw him out a window. That was a fun one. And
Jan, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, Larken, if you want to carry on talking about what you're saying.
But just the beauty of that approach, and I'm glad to finally, well, kind of meet you, talk to you at least, Jan, because I love the approach of, instead of just having two ideas and bashing them against each other, two people saying, I believe this, well, I believe this, using simple questions to bring out of somebody the contradictions in his own beliefs, in his own statements, is just, it's a outstanding thing to watch, because people, when they get uncomfortable and they start to fidget and they start to complain about the questions, it's obvious that there's something they don't want to say. And when somebody doesn't want to say something, it's because he's lying to you. It's because he knows full well that what he's saying he's advocating isn't the whole story. Like, no politician wants to come out and say, I advocate that men with guns come to your house and take your money to give it to me so I can spend it however I want. But that's what every politician wants. But they don't say it that way. They're not dumb enough to say it that way. But if you can just use questions to basically, break it down to just basic principles of, well, you're taking my money without my permission under threat of force, right? And then to watch them dance around, it's just hilarious, because they show with their tap dances and freaking out and getting stressed out and threatening people and running out of the room, they show that they're liars, that they're all liars. Because even if two people disagree on something, if one side doesn't dare to explain his own beliefs you know he's lying. And that's always true of politicians. And I love the way Jan brings that out in all these interviews. These people get all uncomfortable and you know, I have somewhere I have to go. Yeah, right. They always have somewhere they have to go as soon as the questions get uncomfortable. So it's just hilarious to watch, and I really love how he does that in all the videos up there. So just wanted to throw that in.
Thanks a lot for that promo, and thanks for all that.
Jan, you're very, very quiet and garbled. I don't know if you want to try calling back in again.
What, can you hear me now?
Only just barely.
Barely, and it's like there's kind of like a gobbling to it.
Okay, oh, how about now?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to say thanks for commenting on my show and promoting it. I think it is sui generis. It's something different, and I think people can find some value in it, both in the way of knowledge and in the way of entertainment. So,
yeah, I definitely find it entertaining to watch them basically respond to questions that they didn't choose, because when they get to choose the questions, you know, all their favorite interviewers in the mainstream media, and they say, here's what you're allowed to ask me, you know, they have their cookie-cutter answers to make them look good. But when you come along and actually, you know, perfectly politely, you're never nasty with them. They're always nasty to you, but you're never nasty to them. Politely ask these questions that expose their hypocrisy. It's as eye-opening as you can get to anybody who wants to actually, you know, see a hint of truth instead of watching the scripted, boring, pointless interviews that are just, you know, pre-scripted shows for the politicians to put on for the public. So I just love how you do it.
I'm sorry. One of the values that I think I can provide in the kind of Socratic interviewing that I do is I can give the people a glimpse of the person's real character.
Yeah.
And you can get beyond the public facade. Specifically, when you are able to see clearly whether a person is willing to reason or not, you get to know one of the most important things you can know about another human being. And it's very telling. I think that's a value that I try to provide in my show that often you don't get in other interviews.
Yeah, and that, I mean, even just the demeanor, you know, they have their politician smiles and they're putting on the show, but when they realize that cracks are forming and people are going to start getting a glimpse of who these people are, they freak out and they get really nasty. And they steal your tape and they call you names and threaten to throw you out a window, all sorts of fun stuff. And I think it's very valuable for members of the public to be able to see, here's what these people are like when things don't go their way, when they're not, you know, when the whole thing isn't a show, it isn't all scripted, when they have to actually respond to something. These people are not used to that, and reason doesn't matter a bit to them. When their propaganda falls apart, they get really nasty really fast, and I think it's really important for people to see that.
I think one of the things that can be learned when you do the Socratic interviewing, and if you want to focus on the Pete Stark interview, for example,
mm-hmm.
Something I recommend is when somebody insults you, often instead of re-insulting them back, just going along with their thinking or their position can be more effective. I'll give you an example, especially with politicians. So in this interview, he was claiming that the larger the national debt, the wealthier we are.
Yep.
And that I couldn't understand that concept because I didn't have a doctorate in economics. And he was poking fun at my lack of education in the field of economics. and that was the reason why I couldn't understand his viewpoint. So in that interview, what I did was, and this is the question that really cracked him. I said, okay, well, why don't you explain to me and the rest of the people that don't have a doctorate in economics how it is that we can become wealthier by incurring in a few more $1 trillion debts, borrowing a few more $1 trillion. And that, in effect, was the question that cracked him.
Yep.
And I'll tell you exactly why, because when a politician finds himself on one side of the fence and his constituents, all the people that don't have doctorates, on the other, it becomes very uncomfortable.
Yep.
It's very lonely for him over there on the other side of the fence with the doctorate, which in fact he doesn't have.
Right. Yeah, because putting on the show doesn't work if you're insulting the people you're trying to do.
Right. Right. So the politicians, they become, the one thing that makes them nervous is when you separate them from their constituents. And what he didn't realize is by insulting me and putting me on one side of the fence and him on the other, he had lost all his constituents.
Right.
They were on the other side of the fence all of a sudden.
Yep.
And so anyway, that's how going with the insult can work.
Yeah.
And I have other examples. For example, when I interviewed James Woolsey, and he was starting with veiled insults until they became explicit, and finally he just said, my questions were stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the best thing to do when somebody says that is to say, well, okay, elaborate. Why do you think they're stupid?
Right. Yeah, I found that in my whole tax adventure, which you may not know anything about, but if somebody says, that question's ridiculous, my response is, well, then it's got to be really easy to answer. If the question's stupid or frivolous, it must be really easy to answer that only one, as stupid as me wouldn't immediately know it, so please enlighten me.
And if somebody says that you're stupid, the best thing to do is to, okay, well, tell me why. Why do you think I'm stupid? Because I think you'd be surprised how many times the person is flabbergasted and they have nothing to say.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I interviewed Gaffney, Frank Gaffney was a proponent of the Iraq War, and I asked him, he I asked him, well, why couldn't he answer it if it was stupid? He says, because it's just so stupid. But well, why is it stupid? Because it's stupid. He had nothing to say.
Right.
Really. Yep. He really couldn't give any foundation for his position. And so then it's revealed as lacking any reasoning or support.
Right. And another thing I found really familiar was, I think it was Bernie Sanders who kept saying, I already answered you, when he had not. And if he had already answered you, it would have been easier to answer again than keep saying, I already answered you.
Well,
but he didn't.
There's another lesson. I'm glad you brought that one up, because for me that's a lesson in persistence. Because actually, after he said he had already answered the question 3 times, finally, of course he hadn't answered the question. And I asked him a question. He says, well, what was the question? So he didn't know what the question was.
Right. And eventually he...
So he was claiming he had answered it, when then it turned out that obviously he hadn't answered it, because since he didn't even know what it was, how could he have answered it?
Right. Right.
So that for me is a lesson in persistence. Don't let the politicians slough you off by just claiming that he answered already, when he really hasn't answered. And if you stick to it, rephrasing or trying to say, well, was it a yes or was it a no? Because that's another thing. A lot of times they say they answered it, and they say, okay, well, fine. Was it a yes or was it a no? Because I really don't know.
Right. If I'm the one who asked it and you answered and I don't know what your answer is, you must not have done a very good job of answering.
Well, at least if you can clarify finally, is it a yes or a no, I know where to go.
Right. Right.
Take it.
Yeah, I've seen that from the from the IRS a lot, too. We already answered that. Well, where? I never saw it. And if you did, can you point it out to me? But that's usually what that usually means is I don't want to have to answer that, so I'm going to pretend I already did and hope everybody listening forgot what the question was, because I really don't want to say because I know it's going to make me look like a liar or a crook or like I don't know what I'm talking about.
So do we have any callers, or what's happening, James?
There's no callers as yet.
Okay.
Hold on, wait a minute. Maybe.
What would Mr. Rose like to talk about?
Well, it's funny when I came across your videos, because even though I've never had the pleasure of doing that sort of thing to somebody that high profile, for years I've come from the liberty approach of doing these lines of questioning to find out where somebody stands. And I gather that you're a minarchist or objectivist. I'm an anarchist, if you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And
James told me.
I thought it would be sort of fun to go through the lines of questionings that I do with you. Basically, sort of turn it on you and see how it goes, if you're up for that.
Well, we can if you want. One of the things that I keep running into these debates with anarchists, which is really not my agenda. My agenda is to debate with statists. But I do, as you know, entertain them and do them more than is my preference. I'm trying to think what's more valuable. You answering my questions or me answering yours?
And we can certainly do either way. I don't mind being...
Because I didn't, in the debate with Stefan, I wasn't able to ask all his...
Why don't we do this, Jan? You ask Larken a question and tell him, how long a time you're going to give him, okay? And you do the clock. So you ask him a question, and you say, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to answer. And you do the clock. And then, obviously, he's got a clock. And then he asks you one, and he tells you how long he's going to give you to answer, and you both have a watch, and then he'll say, that's it, your time's up, and then you just keep going backwards and forwards like that.
Yeah, well, the truth is that I'm really not up for a debate at the moment. I'll have a conversation with him if he wants. I'm going to get the same questions that I got after the show, through the show, and that's why I'm not enthusiastic about it. I've tried to explain my position, and I'm really not. My unsatisfaction is this. In that debate, did you listen to the debate with Stefan?
That's one I haven't yet heard, so I don't know what will happen.
Well, there's the reasons why objectivists. Do you know the reasons why objectivists are not anarchists? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I used to be one.
Okay, so can you tick them off for me, or you want me to tick them off and we can deal with them one at a time?
And you can certainly correct me if I'm mischaracterizing something.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that using force to defend individual rights is, first of all, it's the only justified kind of force.
Right.
And
we
again,
both agree on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this next point, I'm voicing the objectivist opinion, not mine. And we need a government to have a monopoly on that force to make sure that everybody is protected and to avoid getting into sort of competing companies that may use force for something other than just defending individual rights, so that you don't have, basically you have one big organization that only uses it for defense instead of competing organizations which may evolve into little oppressive regimes fighting against each other and things like that, and that there has to be, the word objectivist comes from the notion that there have to be these objective, rational rules of human behavior and conduct, and that it's not a matter of you get to make up whatever you want and enforce that.
Well, let me give you the argument, and then you can answer it since you're an anarchist. It goes something like this. A society with no governmental monopoly of major force will degenerate into gang warfare. That's the conclusion. Why? There will always be some human beings that choose predation as a means to survive. You agree with that?
Yep, that I agree with.
Presently, these domestic and foreign criminals are held in check by the fact that they have no possibility of overcoming the police power of the state in a direct confrontation. In other words, it doesn't matter how many tanks or guns they pick up, in a showdown against the government, they get wiped out, right?
In a direct conflict, yes.
Yeah, so they cannot, the massive monopoly on major force that the state has in the limited government cannot be, challenged by any gang, no matter how many tanks or guns they have. They're not gonna win that fight, so they don't even try. However, once the state is removed, they can and will have enough weapons to destroy individuals and weak security agencies that refuse to surrender their property. So now you remove the state. Let's start from scratch or just dismantle the state and sell off all its armaments and get rid of that Army and Navy and Air Force. Now it's a different situation. Now you could have more armaments than a small security service, and definitely you will have more arms than an individual. He may or may not be allied with somebody, and if his alliance is with somebody that's weaker than your gang, you can put the muscle on him and take his property.
Mm-hmm.
That's the argument.
Right. Here's how I would respond.
Okay.
The reason I stressed that the bad guy thieves would lose in a direct conflict with the government is that isn't how it happens when there is a government. They co-opt it. They become the government, as most of history demonstrates. The stupid ones have fights with it and get squashed. The smart ones take it over and become the government. So now they have all the guns and all the tanks and all the planes and all the bombs. And by design, they then own the monopoly of force that is too powerful for anybody to resist. Now,
so your view is that right now, the government is run by a gang of like the mafia.
Yep.
And they can and do take as much money as they can from everybody through predation directly.
Yes.
Okay. If that's the case, then how come I'm living comfortably here in my house and they didn't take all my stuff? And if I was up against a gang, I would have lost everything.
Because if they rob everybody of 100%, they trigger a revolution.
So they aren't. So
Jan, can you let him answer?
I got it. But so they aren't. They are not. They are not. And by the way, don't interrupt me. They are not. Okay, they are not doing what the mafia guy could do and does do, and other unlimited governments have done. From Attila the Hun to Genghis Khan to Hitler to Stalin to Mao, real statists that believe in unlimited government and have pushed it to the hill. They have taken the wealth of the people to the degree of a mafia. But the people now are not doing that, right? But you say it's because they think it's not practical or whatever. But they aren't doing it, and they aren't stopping your freedom of speech either, which...
Well, I spent a year in prison for saying things, so yes, they are trying to.
You spent a year in prison for saying something?
For making a video about the federal income tax, yes.
Well, that's obviously an egregious action by the government, but the fact that there are some specific egregious actions like the one you suffered doesn't mean that it's a prevalent thing like it was during the Nazi regime, right?
Right, and the fact that they didn't kill me is a good sign, because in most countries,
right. If there was a mafia or a gang, they would have taken all your stuff and killed you if they wanted or not or whatever. But they don't do that.
But wait, the mafia isn't stupid enough to take all your stuff, because then they're out of business the next week. The difference is not one of our guys are better in Washington. It's that they're not quite as short-sighted and stupid as Hitler, who ended up dead because he grabbed for too much too fast. And as most tyrants in history, they grab for too much too fast and either trigger a revolution or economic collapse. Incidentally, I think the American tyrants are getting impatient, and now we're charging towards an economic collapse.
Right. Well, you see, it is true that our society has transitioned from a limited government to unlimited in certain areas, and that has a lot of horrible consequences. But what we're discussing is a limited government versus no government at all. And if there is just a limited government, then the government doesn't have the right to do that. Now, they can do it in some instances, and they can be less limited to a degree. That's true. But that situation of it's not a perfectly limited government, when compared to the situation of no government at all, most people, like myself, and for the reasons that we'll get into later, think it's preferable to have an imperfect limited government that I can, in principle, reduce back to a limited size than to have no government at all, because of the gang warfare problem. The gang warfare problem puts you in the category of mass destruction, like there are with unlimited statist governments, like the ones I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. That's the reason why, when you're faced with that choice, somebody like myself would prefer the limited government or the one that has been diluted and a mixed system, or it's partly limited and partly unlimited. I still think I have a better chance of having my life, liberty, and property protected than in a situation with no government at all. What do you like to call it? Anarchistic or anarcho-capitalist or whatever, however you describe it.
Right. The one thing I would... another thing I thought of while you were explaining the objectivist position, but I didn't want to barge in and interrupt, there is a fundamental difference when you're comparing government to the gang of thugs. There's a fundamental difference in how people respond to it based on how they perceive it. For example, if the government says, we've decided we need this much money, we're imposing this tax on all of you of this many percent or this many dollars or whatever it is. And most people, they might grumble about it and say, oh, another tax, great, mumble, mumble, mumble. But they believe in an underlying moral obligation to obey government because it's authority. They don't just call their threats, they call them laws. They don't just call their theft taxation. They don't just call their theft, they call it taxation. The difference is, if, for example, a street gang came into my neighborhood and said, we're taking half of what everyone earns, they would all be dead. I would do it myself if I had to, and I know a lot of other people would.
Who would all be dead?
The gang members. Because nobody would perceive their demands as legitimate, which means if you have a neighborhood with, a few people who have guns, and they say, this is bogus, we're not putting up with this, let's put an end to it, there is a gigantic deterrent because of the perception of the victims, where if it's viewed as taxes and laws and government and authority, and then they come along and take half of what everyone earns, which they do already, people mumble and grumble, but they say, oh, well, it's the law, it's taxes, I'm not going to resist because I'm a good law-abiding citizen. So there's that giant difference in perception where which is, I've said before, I would love it if the Chinese government invaded here and tried to do exactly what the U.S. politicians do to us today. Because the American people...
I understand your point, but the way the Chinese government would do it, if you had no government, is they just simply send you a note. Give us X amount or we're going to nuke you. What are you going to do then?
Kill the guy who sent the note.
No, kill the guy. Okay, so then they nuke San Francisco.
Why?
I'm going to tell you why. The same reason why Genghis Khan would send in a note when he had a city in siege. You know what he would do? He would send a note into the city and say, either surrender all your property and you can still stay alive, or we will massacre everybody in this city.
Yep.
Sometimes the first cities that he did that, they say, hell no, we're going to fight. And he would win the fight because he was superior militarily, and then he would kill everybody.
Yep.
The next city, when he sent in the note, you know what happened?
They all complied. They didn't want to die.
And so that's exactly what happens. And the scenario with the foreign tyrant is of that nature. The scenario with the gang members, you think the gang members would all be dead? I'm sorry, you're wrong, because these gang members are not your L.A. street gangs that you see today with guns and rifles. They would have the tanks. They would have more military might than any individual in any neighborhood. And when they put a threat to you, you had no chance to defend yourself. They would not put a threat to people that could defend themselves. So, for example, if a particular neighborhood happened to be better armed than they were, they'd skip it. Predators do not attack what they consider to be equal level or superior level forces. They attack.
Exactly.
That's right. So,
but there is one huge ingredient different from Genghis Khan till today. If I was living under Genghis Khan, I'd say we better pay up because our choices are pay up or die.
Right.
That difference is called the firearm. There are 80 to 90 million gun owners in this country. They cannot be controlled by brute force. After World War II, a Japanese admiral was asked, why didn't you ever consider invading mainland U.S.? And he said, because there would be a gun behind every blade of grass. He knew it could not be occupied by brute force, because something as simple as a firearm, when you're used to fighting with a sword, you have to get right up to the guy. He's obviously going to see you. You're standing right next to him. He has armor and a sword. You have no armor and a sword. You're at a disadvantage because of his funding. One bullet from a $200 rifle can kill a tank driver from 300 yards away. That makes the playing field completely level, where you cannot, with any amount of tanks and bombs and anything else, forcibly occupy a place that doesn't want to be forcibly occupied if they have guns. And there was
We totally disagree on the military issue here. It's very interesting to me. The tanks today, they have guided missiles. This tank is 2 miles away. You don't even know where the hell it is.
And he doesn't know where I am.
Yes, he does. He has the list of the people that are not protected on his screen, and he's giving you a cell call, and you send in your bank account immediately, or I destroy your house. And you have all your guns and your shotguns, and you can have some grenades and whatever you want. You're defenseless.
Wait, are we talking about, in the scenario, am I the only one?
I'm talking about the mafia that is now incentivized to increase their military hardware so that they can increase their pool of victims.
But am I the only resistor, or are there 90 million other ones with guns?
There's people in the neighborhood just as they are today. Some of them, I don't care. You can have a build-up if you want. You cannot oppose them because they're going to pick the victims, the ones that are weaker, and they're going to threaten them. And if they don't pay up, they're going to kill them. And you don't have to kill too many for the rest of them to pay up, just like the Genghis Khan example. So whether you think that you can shoot with a rifle a tank, the guy in the tank is inside a tank. There aren't any rifles that
can't
penetrate.
Live in there. He can't live in a tank. And
no, he doesn't have to live. He just has to park it right. He doesn't even have to park it in front of your house like they used to. Even an old tank would be enough to dominate you with a rifle.
Certainly. Well, that's why I asked if the scenario was just me. If it's just me, I'm doomed. But
there's 90 people. I have a shotgun myself.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the United States has a shotgun, and they have a rifle, and they're good shots, whatever. They cannot oppose a modern military army because the weapons that we have today can kill you even from where you can't even see where they are.
So they're going to rifle. So they're going to hunting rifle. No,
the hunting rifle, you have to see your target. These people have guided missiles in the tank.
But they have to know what they're shooting at.
They have a GPS system that locates the houses and the phone numbers, and they just go down the list making the calls.
But that's what I was asking. Do they have 90 million phone numbers? Because that's going to take a lot of guided missiles.
No, there's gangs all over the country that are doing this. And
and they always happen in cities. Like, I don't have one in my neighborhood because here there isn't government gun control, there isn't government welfare, and there isn't the big war on drugs going on.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Let's see what we agree on, what we disagree on. I mean, you think that if the gangs have that kind of military hardware,
they would never get it.
Why? It only costs $1 million to buy one of those tanks.
Where will they get $1 million?
The gangs right now have millions of dollars. What are you talking about?
What do they get it from?
They have it now.
What do they get?
I'll answer your question if you like. Of course, they get it from the drug money that they use, or the gambling rackets, or all the things that shouldn't be legal and everything. But they have the money now. Before there was any of these stupid drug laws, how did they get their money? Through simple extortion. Yes, they did. They got it through extortion. They would come up to your business and say, pay extortion, I'm going to break your store window.
On a small level, they did that.
Yeah, they did that. Well, this is the way gangs work. This is the predatory mentality. When you don't have a government, well, then they say, well, the more hardware I have, the more people I can threaten, and the more people will have to pay, and the more people pay, the more military hardware I can buy. Well, you'll have gangs all over the country on predation strategies that involve increasing military hardware, and the people that have their guns and their rifles will not be able to oppose them. That's nothing. That's not enough to defend yourself. That's the point.
All of the military leaders, including U.S. military leaders, have learned by experience even if the armed populace you're invading has old antique stuff that they hardly know how to use, defeating an armed populace, no matter what toys you have, is next to impossible. We're learning that in Iraq. We learned it in Vietnam over and over again. And a great example is the Warsaw ghettos.
Okay, well, because, and I'll tell you why, because the strategy that they're using is not the predatory strategy. It's a moderate, take it easy, don't kill. It's not the Nazi strategy. The Nazi strategy worked perfectly fine against people that had guns or didn't have guns.
No, it did not. Not in the Warsaw ghetto. No, it didn't. The Warsaw ghetto was an... Whoops, I hear this weird feedback.
Yeah.
The Warsaw ghetto was a perfect example. You had a handful of doctors and lawyers. Most of them have never even held a gun before. They had half a dozen antique, falling-apart firearms, and they held off the SS for months because they said, if we're going to die, let's resist. And they demonstrated...
They held them up for months, right? But then they succumbed, right?
Yes, to the entire German army, a few
right,
doctors and lawyers, with a
few,
literally a half dozen antique guns. Held them off.
Right, and the next town or whatever, they say, well, we learned our lesson, we're giving up. That's the way it is. That's the strategy. That's the predatory strategy. And so these predators would be incentivized to get extra hardware, military might, like tanks with guided missiles. And you can keep going if they wanted to get some helicopters with guided missiles and whatever. It's easy to get more military might than any individual or any small security agency. And they would plunder, pillage and plunder. This is the
that's why I pointed out Vietnam. I'm not sure when you said this you were referring to that. Were you trying to say that the U.S. government was being moderate in its treatment of Vietnam?
Look,
because
I'm saying. Okay, I'll tell you what I was saying. I'm saying that they didn't have the Hitler strategy.
They absolutely did have the Hitler strategy. We kill you all.
Let me tell you, maybe we better go back to. I'll answer this for you, but let's just go back to the note from the Chinese with the nukes when they nuked San Francisco. You said, what would happen? Then they would, if they'd send a note to Los Angeles, would the Los Angeles people pay up?
Only if they had a government, because there is
okay. They would organize quickly to pay up because they didn't want to be.
I would organize.
Then they would nuke. Then they would nuke. Your scenario is then the Chinese would nuke L.A. Okay, now comes San Diego's turn. Same note, same result. They would just commit suicide and get nuked also.
Well, there's two. I'm not saying what they would do.
We're predicting. We're trying to say what. This is the problem with the anarchist position. You have no answer for foreign tyrants attacking you and extorting all your wealth, all that great wealth.
He has an answer, but you're not giving him a chance to answer.
The point is, the foreign tyrants
when he's talking.
The foreign
let him talk.
The foreign tyrants don't.
You're the one who's interrupting, James.
The foreign tyrants don't need to do it. The thing is, you're painting the picture as if there are competing tyrants and that ours are somehow looking out for us but sort of corrupt or something or other. The way to rob people successfully, the way to be a successful tyrant, and I have a book called How to Be a Successful Tyrant, is to dupe your victims into viewing your control of them as legitimate. Never in a million years could a foreign power control the American people the way the United States government is doing it right now. Japan knew that. Hitler knew that. China knows it. All of the military leaders know you cannot occupy the United States by force. But the tyrants are smart enough to know we don't need to, because instead of fighting their government, we become their government. And that is exactly what they did. And it's what the founders were scared to death of, and why they tried to put in these checks and balances, because they saw we're putting up this system that we hope will defend individual rights. But we're scared to death that what's going to happen is those nasty people that we're scared of are going to be the first in line to get into that thing. And if they get into it, now who has the giant monopoly on force? The bad guys that we needed protection from. And now, by design, they have the machine that's giant and unresistible. I happen to still think it's resistible, but what makes it completely invincible is that it is viewed as legitimate by the victims. If a bunch of Chinese...
if you want to get some insight in why that is, I'll give it to you sometime. Maybe that might be some value I can offer you. But let's see what we agree on and what we disagree on. Do we disagree or we agree on whether the U.S. government is like the Nazi government or the Stalin government or the Mao Zedong government, which was a completely statist government? Do we agree or we disagree? You think?
I would say they're just as evil. They're not quite as tyrannical because they're not as short-sighted.
So because they're smarter, they're less oppressive.
Yeah, they know if you hit the slaves too hard, they run away.
So
like you can exploit them for a lot more.
Stalin had the Soviet Union under his thumb for, 30 or 40 years or whatever, how long he lived. It worked out fine for him, right?
No, it didn't. Well, it did for him. It did for him, but not for the regime.
So your view that total oppression doesn't work is belied by history. I mean, it's worked many times.
Well, works for who? It worked for him while he was alive.
For the predator.
It doesn't for the predator singular or plural, because the American tyrants realize if we do the game more intelligently, look more benign, do it more patiently, we don't do open mass murders, we can keep the game going generation after generation. The short-sighted tyrants like Stalin built the Soviet Union, which then collapsed and fell on its face, which means the game fell apart for his successors. All I'm saying is the American tyrants are smart enough to build an oppressive game that keeps going and that doesn't collapse by economic collapse or violent revolution, not because they're better people, not because they're limited by anything, but because they're smart enough to know you don't beat your slaves so hard they die or run away. And Stalin didn't know that, and Hitler didn't know that, but the American tyrants figured it out.
But for the predator, the guy in charge and his gang, it can work perfectly fine to go for maximum oppression. Is that correct? It's only if you're thinking, like you say, generation after generation, long term, and you care about the sons of the predators and the grandchildren of the predators, then you think
right. If you have a longer
the extreme oppression won't work, right?
But it doesn't. For Hitler, it didn't work out real well either. He ended up dead.
Well, look, if that's what you think, well, explain to me the extreme oppression that the Egyptian pharaohs had generation after generation for 1,000, 2,000 years, 3,000 years. They had statism, and it worked fine.
Yeah.
So in other words, complete oppression can work fine. Year after year, after generation, what you're saying before is not true.
Complete oppression works fine if your victims don't resist. And there's a few ways to make them not resist. One is call yourself government and have them accept your oppression as legitimate. Another is, before
they did it the way they did, and it worked fine, and so you're saying that I thought you were saying that complete oppression didn't work generation after generation. I just gave you an example of where it did.
Yeah, now it doesn't. That's why I pointed out the difference of firearms.
Before it would, but now it can't.
Before the advent of firearms, it was possible to use brute force to control a population, because they can't do anything to you. You go up to one, you hurt him real bad, or kill him. You make an example. You do that today.
You can't do that when the people have a gun or a shotgun or whatever.
You can try it, but if they resist, they don't have to run up to your face to kill you. They can kill you before you even see them. And, every military leader has learned that the hard way. when they try to invade a place where the populace is armed. It just, the dynamic is completely different if you're fighting with swords than if you're fighting with guns.
So your view is that all the political leaders of today, they basically would kill everyone or enslave everyone to the hilt, like Attila the Hun or Genghis Khan or Stalin or Hitler, right? But they've decided that strategically it's not a good idea because they think, well, we could get away with it for 30 years and we can enjoy it, but we want our grandchildren to enjoy this later. Is that your view?
Yeah, basically, except there's one other thing, which is
well, look, I don't think that they care that much about their grandchildren or whatever. I mean, why you think that extreme exploitation doesn't work? I mean, it can work for a long time. The more technology you have, the easier it is to exploit. So the guided missile example, which I gave you, and the nuke example I gave you from China, you know, it's the same thing. I mean, just security services or guns or individual citizens, you think they wouldn't do it. You were saying that you think that the predators would not do this because they didn't get an advantage, because city after city in the United States would continue to resist after they got wiped out with a nuclear bomb, right?
Well,
we disagree on that. You know, I think that after a couple of cities got wiped out, they'd get organized quickly and send the money.
I wouldn't, and I know several million people wouldn't. We would do anything we can to go hunt down and kill the people who did that.
You can do nothing because you're on the other side of the world.
Well,
you don't have your rifle doesn't reach them, and you don't have the weapons to obliterate them. That's the point.
There's boats and planes, but there's another thing that ties in both with the nuking Los Angeles and with the, you know, oppressing people to the hilt. A smart tyrant knows that, like, if you impose a 99% tax, you get a lot of money, and then you get nothing. You kill the golden goose. You kill the producers so they don't produce anything worth stealing. It's like the slave master who works the slave so hard.
Right.
Right. He works the slave so hard he dies. The smart, I'm not saying good, just smart evil guy says, what situation would give me the most power out of this? And if it happens to be letting the slave be relatively comfortable and enabling him to be more productive, even using the profit motive. Like if you work hard, you get a lot of money. And of course, I, the tyrant, get a lot of money too. But a smart tyrant, like the Soviet Union was a bunch of stupid tyrants. They crashed their own game. Hitler was a stupid tyrant. He ended up dead. He reached too far. And I'm not saying, you know, I like it when they're stupid, because I prefer them dead to being smart and oppressing the world. But when it comes to, like, nuking Los Angeles, a smart tyrant is not going to do that, because he's going to say,
why not?
Why would I kill off that much of that which I'm trying to own?
For the same reason that the Genghis Khan would kill everybody in the city when they didn't accept and lay down when he made an extortion.
Right.
Intimidation.
Thinking that if I do one example,
right,
and the
if
rest
one's
follow,
not enough, they'll do two, and if two's not enough, they'll do three. They have plenty of targets left.
Except at some point, the smart tyrant has to think, how much of my own loot am I going to destroy? And today, the smart tyrant thinks, if I do that once, there are millions of people over there who will not stop until I'm dead. And the smart tyrant knows, you in this world, the way it is today, with the technology we have today, if your victims view you as a tyrant, your life expectancy isn't going to be very good. Whereas...
this is the way predators... I think what is the difference between your perspective and mine is that we have a different idea on the predatory mentality. I mean, I'm not a predator because I think it's a stupid strategy. But this is the way that predators work, and the people that decide to go for predation, that's the way their stupid conclusions lead them to that stupid lifestyle.
I have a question for both of you.
Sure.
Well, wait a second, James.
First,
I want to get here.
Well, no. This is a serious question.
Well,
Jan, can you tell me why Hitler did not invade Switzerland? Why Hitler did not invade Switzerland?
It was an inconvenient target. There was, the big mountains and the difficulties, and they also used Switzerland to transfer their loot and get benefits and whatever. It doesn't really matter, because at the end, after they won, after you pick off the low-hanging fruit, then you do the next ones. It's like that. That's the way the predator works. But here's the thing, so look. I mean, so we differ on whether predators would use the extortion model. I think they would, and you think they wouldn't. Is that correct?
No, I think there would be some of each. I'm saying the smart predator runs for Congress. It works a whole lot better. It's a lot safer. They get a lot more power, a lot more money, a lot more security as tyrants. And that is why government is always, by its nature, the biggest threat to everyone on the planet. Because
does it have to be oppressive, or can it be limited?
It can be limited in its oppression. It can never be not oppression. By its nature, it's a ruling.
Why can it not be limited constitutionally, and where they can, and the people believe in limited government, and they only use force to protect the individual rights of the citizens?
Because
why can't they do that?
First of all, that's not what the Constitution describes. When it says Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, it is saying these guys over here have the right to forcibly confiscate money from other people. That is against the non-aggression principle.
If the people think like me, and like almost everybody, that your chances of a happy, satisfying life are optimized by one central government, which you try to control through a constitution and elections and public pressure, that your chances of survival are better under that scenario than the scenario of the gang warfare, which we think would occur, or in the scenario of the extortion by the foreign tyrant, which we think would happen, which you think wouldn't happen, then they are not, nobody's initiating force when they're paying taxes to provide that service that they want.
Except they're not doing it voluntarily. No, they're being forced to.
No. If people organize socially, and they make the judgment, for the reasons that I've been mentioning, that they don't want to take the chance of the gang warfare. They don't want to have the various gangs fighting with the tanks in their neighborhoods and extorting money from them. They don't want to run the risk that foreign tyrants would extort money from them and nuke them and whatever.
Right.
If they decide that their life and liberty and property are better protected with a monopoly of major force, which is what a government is, and that they delegate to that institution the right to protect their life, liberty, and property. This institution, these people that are supposed to perform this service, have to be paid, right?
If the customers want to.
Right.
Up until you said
the people, well, if they say, hey, we want you to protect us against this foreign tyrant in China that has nukes and that could extort money from us, but we don't want to give you any money to buy nukes or to buy submarines or defense systems. Well, it's like they did nothing. I mean,
yep. And the government has no right to coerce them into paying for something they don't want to pay.
Right, but they, obviously, if they're rational people, They will not only delegate the power to defend their individual rights, but they will agree, we will set a defense budget and we will pay for it.
But there's an important line that keeps getting stepped across and back and forth on, which is most of what you described is called a free market defense system, except when the notion of government comes in. The notion of government is an essentially different animal because it's not just an employee of the people who hire it. Like I can hire a bodyguard, or my neighborhood can hire somebody to walk the streets at night and keep an eye on things. Government is a fundamentally different entity. It, by definition, has the right to rule, and that includes the right to impose taxes. That means forcing people to pay for it. And once you have that, it's the oppressor. It's the violator. It's the thing to be scared of. Because once people have it in their heads that there is a group of people who have the right to do these things to them, that is the threat. If you have if you compare two situations, you have two towns right next to each other.
We're talking about a group of people. Look, people can organize socially under different principles. You agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. They could organize, like you said, with no government, right?
Right.
And I'm perfectly happy for people to do that and try their luck with the dangers that I just predicted. The gang warfare in the country, between all these gangs that would load up with military hardware, and security services, and also the foreign tyrants and foreign criminals that would use extortion. All that is enough for me to say, no, I don't want to take my chances with that. So, but I'm happy that people think that that's not a risk, that's not a problem. They can live fine without that. I'm perfectly happy.
That's not at all what I said. I didn't say that's not a problem. I agree all those things are a problem. I agree that people should organize and fund a defense system. That's why I'm trying to point out the one distinction.
Okay, well, so let's modify that later. You will describe to me later exactly how the anarchist society deals with those problems. That would be interesting, and you can explain that to me.
Well,
but what I'm saying is that another group of people, the people that started this country, the United States, they believed that in limited government, which is they believed that their life and liberty would be better protected if they did have a government, but if it was limited to defending their individual rights. Now, when they formed that government, they're not stupid. They don't expect an effect without the cause. They decided, well, of course, if we're going to create this institution, we have to give them the money to do it and provide the means for them to get the money to do it and to tax us for this purpose.
Right. And here,
so those people, those people that are being taxed for that limited government purpose, nobody's initiating force against them. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
That isn't correct. Somebody is initiating force against them.
Absolutely. Here's the essential question. So
let me ask you another question. If you go into the supermarket and you take all the food and then you just leave without paying, and the guy who owns the supermarket stops you and says, "Hey, give me the money," and says, "Hey, don't initiate force against me." Is he initiating force when he grabs you?
No, I did.
Okay,
I did by taking the stuff.
Okay, so then explain to me, when you hire someone to do a job, and you say, "Well, what?"
I didn't hire them to do that job.
No, when these people, the people that believe in limited government, when they decided to organize under limited government as opposed to unlimited government, when they got together and said, when they were persuaded by John Locke that they had individual rights that should be respected and that the best way to have them protected is by a limited government, and they organized, and they gave that government the right, they delegated to them the right of self-defense and the right to collect money for that purpose.
From whom?
From them.
All
from
of
the
them?
people.
See, this is the crucial underlying question.
From the people that were
Who,
organized.
all of them? Every last one of them? This is the underlying question. I keep trying to ask it.
Okay.
Did
every last one of the people consent? Actually, no. They're just a majority of the people that were involved in the political decision.
See, here's the underlying question. There I am in 1800 standing in Pennsylvania, and I said, I don't like this. I don't agree to that. Do all the other people who believe what you just described, which wasn't all of them, it wasn't even a majority, but do all those people have the right to use force against me to make me fund what they say I need?
Okay, but let's get to that. This is the thing that seems to obsess the anarchists, the ones who disagree. But the ones who agree, nobody's initiating force against them. Is that correct?
Well, except when the taxes change or are higher than they expected or wanted or voted for.
Well, but they agreed that within a certain measure, they're willing to be taxed for these purposes, right?
If they actually agreed to the exchange, okay, that's fine for them. They just can't agree on my behalf.
Right. So this is the majority of the people. That the majority of the people think, and not on a simple majority, but a super majority of the people think that their lot is better with a government than without one, and that they're willing to pay for these services. So, with regards to those, it's unfair to say that the government is initiating force. Is that correct?
Only if they agree to the amount every time and what it's used for, which nobody in the country has.
Well, their agreement is indirect, and a more or less not an exact. It's a representative agreement. So they elect representatives, and those representatives exercise some judgment, and they can vote them out, and et cetera. You know the system. So
well, agreement.
It is it is agreement with giving the agent some latitude.
Okay.
They agreed. They were sufficiently smart enough to know that it couldn't be down to the cent because it wouldn't work. That they had to give the agent some latitude in the contract. You understand?
Yeah, I believe nobody in the country.
They gave the agent some latitude.
I don't believe anyone alive did. I don't believe there is one person in this country who thinks that what government takes his money for is spent on things he wants to voluntarily support, except people who don't pay anything. In other words, none of them agree to it. But
nobody agrees with. Well, we disagree on that as well. I mean, in fact, they agree. They agree with a lot of stuff that they shouldn't agree with, and that have nothing to do with defending individual rights.
Right, but to me,
anyway, okay. So, but with regards to those people that agreed, and they agreed to give the agent some latitude, and this system, the government's not initiating force, right?
Except that the government changes the deal every 5 minutes. So yes, they are.
But we just went through that, right?
If somebody agrees, you can take as much of my money as you want and do whatever you want with it. That's really stupid, but then they agree to it. But nobody did that.
No, that's not what I said. That's the unlimited view.
That's the government view. It's what they do now.
No, that's the sins. For some reason, when you talk about the government, you don't distinguish between an unlimited government and a limited government.
Because there is no such thing as a limited government.
Okay, well, you don't think that...
but we still haven't gotten...
A limited government is a government where the functions that the government can perform are defined and limited.
Well,
that's right.
Are you saying we have that now?
No.
Okay.
I mean, did you hear what I said in the beginning of this discussion?
Yeah, that's why I asked, because that's certainly not what we have now. But my question is still isn't about the people who agreed to sort of let the government decide stuff. what about the guy who said, I don't want to fund you at all? Does the majority, even if it's everyone in the world except that guy,
right.
do they have the right?
I'm going to deal with that in a second, okay?
Okay.
But it seems that that's the thing. What I'm saying is that you say that the government has to be, by nature, it is necessarily an initiator of force. And I'm showing you that it is not. When the people agree to limited government and they give the agent some latitude in the nitty-gritty of how much. Now, at a certain point of magnitude, I mean, obviously, it doesn't work, and they disagree, and they won't go with it. But it is possible to give an agent some latitude in decision-making, right?
Not in the context of government. And here's why. If I hire a security guard and say, you know, if you come by a few times and he says, well, can I wear a gun? Yeah, if you want to, you can wear a gun. Well, how about a big gun? Well, I'll leave that up to you. I'll give you the latitude to decide. If at some point he's walking around with a machine gun scaring all my neighbors, I have the power to say, you're fired. Nobody in this country has the power to say to the supposedly limited government, you're fired. They will be forcibly extorted to pay for it for the rest of their lives.
They can't vote the guy out.
Voting has nothing to do with being able to fire someone who works for me.
Well, that's how you fire politicians, by voting them out.
And notice it doesn't work. Well, that comes back to the question again. If I say, I don't like you anymore, and they say, well, you have to get all your neighbors to decide that
it works. It can work, and it has worked, and why you say it can't work.
Look at a graph of the federal budget. But if
it can work. I mean, that there's nothing. The electoral system works to get rid of people if the electors are smart enough, and they can get rid of them. Right?
They're not. But the principle underlying this is, if I hire a security guard, I don't need all my neighbors' permission to fire him, and all my neighbors can't say, well, sorry, we voted that you have to pay for him because we like him. That's why I keep getting back to that question. Is it okay for the majority to force the guy who doesn't like the deal to pay for it?
Yeah. Well, what I'm telling you is, okay, you want...
I want an answer to that.
So, yeah, I told you I would end. That's the question that I answer all the time, and I'm getting better at it, actually, and I've seen it clearer and clearer as I keep...
Well, can you answer it then?
Point. Yes, I will answer it. How many times did I answer it for you, James? Can you answer that question? How many times?
I don't think you ever
did.
How
many times did, maybe not to your satisfaction, but how many times did I give you an answer?
Let's hear the answer to the question.
How many times? Just answer that question.
You never did answer it.
Yes, at least 3 or 4. That's why I'm saying. I've answered this question so many times.
This pattern sounds familiar.
My answer is getting better and better.
We talked about this pattern at the beginning of the show.
So that's what
I'm saying.
Now, okay. So you say, I want to get 1 point at a time.
No.
You
answer the question.
No. I'll answer the question after my question is answered clearly. And I
don't think you can answer the question, Jan.
Well, I'll answer one if he'll answer it after that.
Listen, James, you can think what you want. You know, and really I've been very patient answering the same questions so many times. For you to say that I haven't answered is just ridiculous.
Well, I haven't ever heard your answer. Okay, I haven't heard
And I will answer it for you, too, as well. That's why I wasn't enthusiastic about this, because I know this is what all this is all about. But it might get interesting. With regards to these people that agreed to pay, there is no initiation of force, right?
Wrong.
Okay, so
they did not agree to this amount. They did not agree to these things that the government does, and they cannot fire them.
They can't, because they can't vote them out.
No, first of all, the system is made so they can't vote them out, but voting them out is not firing them. One person being able to say, I don't want your services anymore, I'm not going to pay you anymore, that's firing somebody.
When you vote them out, then the people, you vote out the people with a particular public policy that you disagree with, you're firing them and you're changing the policy by voting people that agree with the new position.
The majority can, in theory, do that. It doesn't actually work, but the majority can. But that's why I'm not asking about the majority. I'm talking about the one guy who says, you know, I wanted to pay you to protect me. Now you're starting wars all over the place. You have this welfare state. I don't want to pay anymore. You cannot say that was by consent anymore. He didn't agree to any of it. He is being coerced. Government is initiating violence against him in the name of the collective to make him fund something he doesn't want to fund, and that is the underlying principle of all government that cannot be avoided. It's why government is inherently illegitimate, because there cannot be a government that doesn't initiate force against somebody, because if it doesn't, it's not authority anymore. It's a private security agency, and it has no monopoly.
Okay, so and your view is that if the government initiates force against one person, it's the same as if they initiate against 50% of the people. They're a force initiator.
Morally, it's exactly the same.
Right,
if I rob one person or 50 people, it's just as evil.
Right, and we disagree on that, because I would prefer to live under a system where the amount of initiation of force is minuscule, like 1%, and not 50 or 60 or 70%. And for you, it doesn't make any difference, no problem, right?
No, I want it to be none.
No, I know. You want it to be none, but when it's 1%, you call it force initiation. Just whatever amount of initiation there is, it's initiation, and it's no good.
Yes,
and right, right. And
I advocate none.
I'm saying to you, there is no system where there'll be no initiation. It's just a matter of choosing between systems where there'll be more or less initiation. And under anarchism, there'll be wholesale initiation all over the place, where you won't even recognize your neighborhood because there'll be tanks in the streets. That's what I'm telling you. And every penny that you make will be extorted completely or halfway or whatever to the discretion of the predator.
What you're telling me,
you want to take that chance, it's okay.
What you're telling me,
but the truth is that the choice is between wholesale, how much initiation there's going to be. It's not a choice between some initiation and none. There is no possibility of none.
There is a possibility of you not advocating it. What you're telling me is you
I'm advocating the system that has less initiation as opposed to one that has more. That's
you personally are advocating violence against me personally, because you say, if you don't, somebody else will, even worse. That is immoral.
I'm going to answer your question now, since this is the one that that worries you so much. But really, I think it's unfair to say that the government necessarily has to be an initiator, in the sense that, well, it's always the case that when 500,000 people are doing something, whatever they're doing, somebody's going to make some mistake somewhere, and something's going to be wrong. Of course, the issue is whether it's going to be much worse without the organization or with it. That's the real issue.
No, the issue is, are you personally
you want to deal with
violence?
The guy who decided that he doesn't want to pay. He was born in a system where there is a government, and let's say, for argument's sake, because I'm advocating limited government, that it's a limited government that he's born into, and he says, look, I don't want this service of you're doing to protect me from the foreign tyrant in China, right?
Right.
I don't want this service to protect me from these gangsters who can overpower me with more military might. I don't want that.
Right.
So don't charge me any money for it, right?
Yep.
This is the thing now. Right. Okay. What I think then is that a person like yourself should be afforded the opportunity to live in some part of the country with other like-minded people and organize socially along this principle, and try out a social organization without any government, and make a transition into that system and try it out. I don't think that view is integratable into society with the people that think that they need a government and think that their life will be bloody hell if they don't have a government. These people and the people that think that they can live fine without any government are unintegratable. So basically,
I actually agree with that, but for a different reason.
Okay, well.
But what you're telling me is.
So what I'm saying is that we should respect them, and in the same way that you try to make an accommodation with somebody when there's a conflict of rights. What you have here is a situation of conflict of rights, that if one person's right is respected, the other person's right will necessarily be violated, and vice versa. And the vice versa is the part that you don't want to understand.
Where's the right on the other side?
I'm going to tell you what it is. It's that if I said to you, okay, you don't have to pay, and everybody who doesn't want to have to pay doesn't have to pay, and then they can all be free riders and enjoy the service that I think and the rest of us think that they need, but they don't want to admit that they need, and they want to just get it for free. But we are such sacrificial selves that we say, well, we'll sacrifice it, and then more and more people won't pay, and the system will collapse, and we'll turn into the system that you wanted, which is the anarchist system. And then we'll have the bloody warfare, and then all my property, not just a little bit like now, a whole bunch, and my life and everything else, bloody warfare in every goddamn neighborhood. That's what I will suffer. So I'll lose everything. So if I grant you your right to, because I'm kind-hearted and moral, and I don't like to initiate force, and I'm against it in my life, and I don't practice it, and I want to respect you, what happens? I sacrifice my own life, my own liberty, and my own property. And that's why I won't do it, and the other people won't do it, because they're not that stupid. They know that what will happen. And so the kind-hearted ones, like myself, will say, well, we respect you. You want to live like this? Fine. Let's try to find an accommodation. But that's not the perspective of the anarchist. You want to force it through what is simplistic, rationalistic logic, which has a flaw. The flaw is that if I accept your view, then I sacrifice my life and my liberty. It's a situation of duress. When there's conflicts of interest, there is no way that both rights can be respected. So that's why I would not permit you to just not pay and just go along with it, because it's going to destroy what's protecting me. That's my view, and that's the view of most people. And it's not
I know it's the view of most people. It's just immoral and irrational.
Well, you think it's irrational, but I told you the dangers. The gang warfare will occur. The gang warfare will occur with the gangs, from domestic gangs, the foreign gangs, and guess what? The well-meaning people like yourself and me, when we have a difference, and there's millions of differences happening around the country, and some of the people will.
Right now.
Some of the
people want to rob me forcibly.
No, I don't want to. I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you to organize socially the way you want.
But you're evicting me from the country.
No, I'm not evicting you. You're in the country. You don't have to leave the country.
Well,
I'm saying let's separate some part of the country. I say let's separate some part of the country so that you can, and others that believe similarly, even though it's a small number, fine, try it. And I wish you the best. If I'm wrong and you don't have gang warfare, then I'll admit, gosh, I was wrong. All the facts of human nature that I thought were so obvious, and the reason why this has been discarded forever is because it's so obvious that this is what happens, and people have experimented in anarchist situations that are semi-anarchistic, where there's just been wholesale slaughter and horrible life, that people are willing to even accept statism. Hobbes was willing to accept statism because the state of nature was so horrible that it panicked him so much, this scenario that I presented to you, that he was willing to accept almost anything. I think there's a third choice. I think you can have a limited government and you can have a very low level of initiation in total, which gives you a life that's much safer and much better than any other option. So that's the least of the three.
Look at the underlying principle behind what you're saying. You are saying that because of a prediction you make about what would happen if you let me be free and everyone else, you are going to advocate the initiation of violence against me for your good and my good and everyone else's. That is the excuse that Hitler used and Mao used and Stalin used and Castro used and Pol Pot. It is the excuse of every tyrant in history. William Pitt said, necessity is the plead of every tyrant. We need to initiate violence against you to save you from a big, scary world. That does not make it moral. It is
Show me
evil.
where I'm wrong. Tell me where the anarchist society doesn't lead to bloody gang warfare, doesn't lead to the extortions by the foreign tyrants, and doesn't lead to a gang warfare between the reasonable people in the country who aren't criminals, aren't predators, and just have differences of opinion that escalate into gang warfare.
Your premise is completely inaccurate, but to even get to that discussion assumes that if there's a likelihood that bad things will happen if you don't oppress me, you have the right to oppress me.
Yes, if I think I'm defending my... Yes, that's right. If we're in a lifeboat and the lifeboat is sinking and if somebody doesn't get out, the lifeboat is going to sink for sure, in my view, then I'm going to try to get somebody out of the lifeboat. You're not. You're going to just sink.
I'm going to get out myself and hang on the side.
No.
I will not murder somebody for myself. Right.
But if you hang on the side, the lifeboat sinks anyway. Your position is under no situation would you initiate force. Is that correct?
Well, you can make up gray areas.
No. Oh, no. Is that your position or not? Under no situation you would initiate force, right? Because you're calling me an initiator and an immoral person because I'm a tyrant and willing to initiate force against you.
Yes.
So you under no situation would initiate force. Is that correct?
I can make up one situation, and you can think of more. If somebody
I can make up a whole bunch of
property,
them. I can make up a whole bunch of them, so you can get rid of that nonsense that I'm an immoral person because I initiate force. You're willing to initiate force under the same circumstance when you think your life's a threat and you're under duress.
No,
you're going to initiate
I would not
force.
push somebody out of the boat. That is the difference between us.
Okay, so
and I would not rob somebody because of prediction I make about what happens if I don't.
The hypothetical is that if you hang on to the boat will sink anyway.
Then I let go.
And you will die, right?
That sucks.
Right. Okay.
I would rather die than murder.
That's not right. Okay. So exactly.
You would not.
And
you would rather murder than die.
Exactly. That's exactly true.
And you would rather steal.
And you're a sacrificial soul.
No.
You'll sacrifice yourself. That's right.
No, it's not about sacrificing
you will sacrifice
myself.
yourself, right. And if I put a gun to your head and said, steal this person's money, you wouldn't do it, and you would get shot, and you wouldn't care. Now I understand. And that's exactly, I can understand your mentality completely. You believe in self-sacrifice.
No,
and you would yes, you do, because
I believe in non-aggression.
I know, you believe it as an irreducible primary, as an absolute, which you're never going to violate, which you said you would sometimes, but now apparently you would.
Well, you didn't let me finish my statement. I can make up a situation, like if somebody buys land all around my house and says, you can't step on my land,
right.
I would walk across his land.
You would violate his rights. You would initiate force. Oh, my goodness. You're a force initiator.
You just admitted you'd murder a human being.
That's right.
And you just admitted you would advocate
that's exactly right.
That's exactly right.
If you had a gun to my head, and I'm convinced that you're going to shoot me. If I don't shoot somebody else, I would shoot them. That's right.
Yeah, and worse than that, you would rob an absolutely innocent person just because of predictions that all the time.
No, I would rob a person if they had a gun to my head under duress, but you wouldn't, right?
I missed the first half of that. What?
If somebody has a gun to your head and they said, take that person's money, you would say, no, I'm not going to, and then you shoot.
I'd take the money, and then when the guy was gone, I'd give it back.
No, take and give it to me. You would steal the person's money if you had
I would take it, I would give it to you, I'd follow you home, and I'd take it back.
Right. But let's suppose you couldn't. At the time, you would initiate the force, right?
But you're trying to make up a completely
so would
different
I.
scenario.
I mean, if you can find a way out. But under duress, if your life and liberty are at stake, you would, unfortunately, lamentably, and against your heart, you would initiate force, would you not, or not?
If it was a lower level that could be fixed, yeah. But that's you're talking about a scenario.
Well, if he said shoot them in the foot, would you shoot them or not?
My choices are getting shot or shooting them in the foot.
Yeah.
I'd ask them, if I shoot you in the foot and give you a whole bunch of money later, does that work for you? But listen, there's a fundamental difference. Nobody is pointing a gun at your head. You are advocating.
Here's the difference between you and me. I can tell, and the only benefit of this discussion is maybe I can save your life. Although all these scenarios are unlikely, and they're
my integrity matters more to me in my life.
That's the thing. There we got it. Right.
Yours does not, because you are willing to advocate violence against me.
Based on
some future made-up worry about what you think is going to happen if you don't.
Not about a made-up worry, about a proven scenario historically, and about any common sense teasing of the premises involved in anarchistic society.
Compare the numbers of murders and thefts committed by government to those committed by private people.
Who do you think should be the ultimate beneficiary of your actions?
Me.
Well, you just said you're willing to sacrifice yourself
for
this
sacrifice.
principle. Oh,
I said
but you were willing to die for not, in the case of, if you were presented with a situation where you had to initiate force and
not out of sacrifice, out of integrity.
So you think, what do you think the purpose of principles, moral principles is?
To guide the way we live.
For what ultimate end?
To make humanity what humanity should be. Peaceful coexistence.
That's the difference between you and me.
You don't
You think it's for, that's it, you are a sacrificial soul. Your ultimate end is for humanity. Did you hear yourself?
That's
it's
why
not
people
yourself,
interact voluntarily.
It's for humanity. So you are a sacrificial soul who's willing to sacrifice for humanity so that humanity can live well, but if you have to die in the process, it's okay. Whereas I disagree. I am not a sacrificial soul for humanity. I love humanity to live well because I can live well, and I think there's no inherent conflict under ordinary circumstances.
Why do you advocate violence against everyone you've ever met?
No, I don't advocate violence against everybody I ever met. No, I don't. I don't advocate the violence at all. In fact, I'm a very non-violent person.
You just admitted you advocate taxation. Against me, unless I'm the only one, I presume it's in general, that you think that these worries of yours of what would happen if we were free justifies you advocating the initiation of violence against everyone you have ever met in your life.
No, not at all.
That's what taxation is.
You think, I just proved to you that it isn't, and you won't accept it. That was the first part of our discussion. When the people agree that it's necessary to protect their lives and liberty, and they agree to delegate that right to the government, it is not initiation.
But nobody agrees to that now. But
this is the implied. It's not a matter. It's another thing that you don't understand. You think this is like a contract that you sign. It's not a contract. It's a
master and a slave.
That's right. It's not a contract. It's implied in the social organization. There's an implication.
There ain't no implied contract.
There is
utter nonsense.
You want? You know what I'm going
to say that you agree
I'm not
something.
saying it's not I didn't say it was an implied
by wearing
contract.
shoes.
It's implied in the society, in the social organization. There is a principle that's implied. Whether you accept that social organization or not, you think it's optimum or not, and that's where we have our difference. And I am perfectly happy for you to try out your social organization, but you don't want to. You do not want to do that. What you want to do is impose your view on the other people, and they would be sacrificial souls if they did, because if they did like you, which they take the non-initiation of force as an irreducible primary without tearing it away from the context in which it was formed and why it was formed. You don't know why that principle was formed. You don't even know, do you?
Yes, I have.
What is the derivation? Because you think that the ultimate value for you is to have humanity well organized and happy and progressive and for the benefit of humanity. And that is not where that principle comes from. That principle operates within a particular context, and the function of that principle is to optimize your personal possibility of a happy life, which you are quite willing to give up. And I'm presuming that yes, you are. You are very willing to give it up. And so the only benefit of this conversation is for me to persuade you that your ultimate ethical end is mistaken and to adopt the right one. So that I can save your life. And if I save your life, this conversation will have been worthwhile. If not, it's mostly a waste of time.
The right one, according to you, is that if I see a problem on the horizon and that I think it can be solved by advocating the forcible theft of 300 million people around me, I should do so.
So you're saying that 300 million people disagree with being taxed to protect their individual?
You will not find one person who likes everything his tax dollars are spent on. Nowhere.
That's unlimited government. We're not talking about unlimited government.
That's what we live under.
No, but I'm not talking about that. Am I?
Any government, you will find them doing things that people don't
So now you see, that's the point that I've been making. You blur the difference between unlimited government and limited government. It makes no difference. I just told you that I'm not advocating unlimited government, but every time you come back and say, look what happens under unlimited government. I don't know why you do that, because
we've gone back and forth between two scenarios, today and 1800. Whichever one you're talking about, you advocate that because of your prediction of bad things that will happen if you don't do this, you advocate that these people called government forcibly extort money from people you don't know, you've never met, they've never done anything to you because of what you predict will happen to them if they don't. Now, if 90% of them are with you and say, okay, we'll voluntarily contribute, have at it. But if I'm not, if I say your predictions are wrong,
right,
you are holding the position that your prediction of the future justifies the violation of my rights. Like I said, that is what Stalin did, it's what Hitler did, it's what all the tyrants do, is say, life will be scary and horrible unless I forcibly control you. And that is why limited government cannot exist, because once you accept that premise, that necessity...
I think we have different ultimate values, or do we have the same
let me
ultimate
steal
value?
your money. Let me steal your wealth while I'm doing that as well.
And it doesn't matter the form of oppression.
Look,
the form of oppression doesn't matter. Once you accept the premise that necessity justifies the initiation of violence against everybody you know, we better tax them to defend against these scary people, then why isn't it, now we better tax them to feed the poor, because they might starve if we don't. Now we better tax them to have these giant indoctrination camps, because people might be dumb if we don't. Now we have to tax them to create a giant war on drugs, because, hey, people might get addicted if we don't. Once you step over that principle, you are the enemy of freedom.
Oh, the ultimate value that you have is what?
Free will.
That's your ultimate value, free will?
My self-ownership. I own me. And as it happens, it completely coincides with everybody else owning themselves, too.
So how is that, so you can do whatever you want whenever you want? Is that what?
If it doesn't violate somebody else's self-ownership, yeah.
But if it does violate somebody else's self-ownership, then
no.
Then
I don't have the right to tax them. I mean, there's lots of things that I can look down the road and say, that scary thing is going to happen if lots of people don't do this. But guess what? I don't have the right to force them to fund the solution that I want.
So your ultimate end is to be able to decide how to live your life and to own yourself. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, to own myself. And as it happens, that coincides perfectly with each individual owning himself, because I don't live for the sake of the rest of humanity, but the rest of humanity being free is perfectly in line with me being free. Advocating for 1 second that they be oppressed is not in line with me being free.
So if you were persuaded that an anarchist social organization made it less likely that you could exercise your ownership of yourself, your life and your liberty and your property, then otherwise you would abandon the anarchist position?
Wait, what?
If you say that your ultimate end is to be able to own yourself and to make decisions on how to live your own life and how to use
free,
your own
everybody else
property.
is free, it all fits together, yes.
Right. So if you were persuaded that the anarchist position made it less possible for you to own yourself.
Wait, how? How could a lack of government?
Well, that's what I was trying to lead you to. If you all the consequences of not having a government make your life make your life more dangerous, make it less likely that you will be able to have,
so you're talking about
use your property and use your liberty, etc.
You're talking about there's no government and some nasty guy does some nasty thing. Okay, now I get it.
No, some nasty guy. No, I told you the reasons why already. But the point is that if you were persuaded that the anarchist system would make it less likely that you could exercise ownership over your life, then you would abandon that perspective. Is that correct?
No, because first of all, you talk about the anarchist system, which is a contradiction.
So then it's not your ultimate end.
It's an anarchist lack of system. You can't. You're saying the anarchist system.
The
second
anarchist
of all,
situation.
to give up.
The scenario of anarchism.
Yeah, to give up. To say,
if you were persuaded
that
the anarchist scenario, the one you're advocating, right, would make it less likely for you to be able to own your life and to your property and be free to decide what you want, then you would give that up, would you not?
Except you're saying a logical impossibility. You can't. If I value,
it's impossible that under the anarchist situation you would be able, you would have less of a chance to decide how to live your life and to dispose of your property and.
No, the second part, if I value free, I mean, if there was no government, someone can still shoot me or rob me, or I don't become invincible. The second part of the question is what doesn't make any sense. Because to say, I value free will, I value my self-ownership and everybody else's self-ownership, would I give that up if it would do more to benefit self-ownership? That's a self-contradiction.
So,
in other words, would I adopt government, the antithesis of free will and liberty, if I thought it would help liberty? I'd have to be insane to think that.
If under the anarchist scenario, your life would be less free and, more at risk.
Which is possible.
Would you give up the anarchist situation?
No, you're basically saying, if some bad guy hurts you, will you throw away your principles and advocate the initiation of violence? No, I won't. No. And you will, because you already said
that's not what I'm saying. It's
it is what you're saying.
Because you've already, here in this discussion, you've given me two different ultimate values. And so I think you better think about that and decide what your ultimate value is, because if you and me have a different ultimate value, it's not strange that we should advocate different political systems. Would you agree with that?
But your ultimate value is
but you have expressed two different ones. You know which ones they were, right?
No, it was two things phrased the same, or using different words. Free will and self-ownership. They're the same thing.
No. That prior to that, you said the harmonious development of humanity.
You said that was my ultimate goal.
You said that. You talked about humanity, not me.
That is why I advocate freedom, because that's what it leads to.
That's what your ultimate value is, or not? The benefit of humanity?
No.
It's not. Okay, well,
no,
originally I thought you said it was.
that happens to be what my ultimate value serves, which is self-ownership. That's why I keep saying it coincides perfectly with everybody else and their self-ownership.
What does self-ownership mean? You mean the right to decide how to live your life? And
it means I have no master.
Okay, so if your life is more at risk, is you have less self-ownership or the same amount or what?
Oh,
in a scenario, a social scenario, your life is more at risk.
I think it's
if you're more likely to die under a particular social scenario. Is that more self-ownership or less?
Being dead? Wait, what?
No, if you are more likely to die under a particular scenario. I've been trying to show you that the anarchist position increases your likelihood of dying.
You've been asserting that over and over
I know.
again.
I haven't convinced you. I'm sure of that. But
no,
the arguments...
that's why I asked, compare murder done by authority to murder done by private people and tell me which ones I should be scared of.
But, you know, it's interesting, you know,
or 200 million. 200 million people murdered in the name of government, and you're telling me that's what I need in order to protect me from scary people.
Well, here's the difference. You know, you think that this government is the same as every other government.
No, I don't.
Well, okay.
They're smarter.
Well, why do you quote the statistics of governments like Stalin and Mao when you talk about our government? Our government isn't like that. It's much different. It's
much different in that they plan better.
What?
They have murdered plenty of people. They just weren't here. Well, actually, it's murdered people here, too, but not nearly as many as some of the others. But you're telling me...
The degree is quite large, and if it were a limited government, it would be even larger, right?
If which would be larger?
Okay. Well, look. I think we have a difference on what your ultimate value is, and the other difference is that you at one time say that it's an absolute that you would never violate the initiation of force, but then later you say you would.
Well, you can make up an
artificial
scenario.
So there are some scenarios where you would initiate force. Why don't you apply all that invective that you applied to me to yourself?
Because
you're willing to, you just admitted that you're willing to initiate force, right?
And actually,
under some situations.
It would look that way to some people, but no, it wouldn't be. If somebody bought up all the land around me...
you would never initiate force under any circumstance. This is a contradiction. You're going back and forth on this.
No, if it would look like that, which is why I use that as an example. If somebody bought land all around me and said, you're not allowed to step on my property...
If somebody put a gun to your head...
There is no contradiction here. There is a contradiction in what you are saying. Because you pretend to be opposed to the initiation of violence, and yet you use the excuse of some future fear that the tyrants are always harping on. The world will come to an end if you don't give us power, as justification for you personally advocating violence against me personally and 300 million other people. And that is not having a principle. That is not having integrity.
No, that is coming to the same judgment that everybody else just about in this society.
Yeah, and look how well it works.
Well, did you know what I was going to say?
They all believe it, too. I agree. Most people are statists.
Believe what?
They believe that government is less scary and less dangerous than freedom because they've been lied to all their lives about it. My point is,
they believe
whether that's right or not,
be more protected under a limited government.
They're absolutely wrong.
Some of them even think under unlimited government than under no government at all. And,
they believe that. I agree. They're wrong, but they believe it.
Right. And
because of that belief, they advocate violence against me and everyone else in the country. And so do you.
Did you say that under some circumstances you would be willing to initiate force?
I described it that way. I shouldn't have, because the example actually
so
I wasn't the initiator.
You were wrong when you said that.
It was inaccurate, but it sounded like it would sound to
so
most
under
people
no
like
circumstances.
The initiation of,
okay, so your position is under no circumstances you initiate force.
You could try to come up with a scenario.
I will come up with them
artificial.
if it helps you a break, so that you can apply all that invective that you applied to me to yourself.
Well, the invective is because you advocate that I be robbed for a future word.
Because once you realize that it's not an absolute, maybe you'll be a little bit more moderate in your evaluation of the people that are willing to violate that principle, which I think is a valid principle.
There are two
within a particular
options.
Circumstance.
There are two options
context.
here. You own you, or somebody else owns you. There's two options. I own me, or somebody else owns me. There can't be a halfway in between. I all the way believe that I own me, and that you own you. And that means I can't look down the road and say, that scary thing might happen. I'm going to go advocate the forcible confiscation of Dan's wealth to pay for it. Jan, sorry.
Okay. I think our time's up. I think I know what our differences are. We have a different ultimate value. My ultimate value is a long, happy life, optimizing the possibility of a long, happy life.
As a slave?
No, not as a slave. As a person living in a limited government and
a limited slave.
No.
I believe you should be free, and you're arguing with me that you should.
I'm arguing I told you that I don't like to have arguments. I like to have the arguments with the statists who are the real problem in our society.
Except the
not the anarchists who just don't want to admit that don't want to admit all the logical consequences of.
All right, thank you for joining us tonight, everybody.
The Constitution was the freaking problem. It led to this. Start from nothing.
Come and join us tomorrow night, Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Let's Talk Live here on Blog Talk Radio. Thank you for joining us, and everybody have a great evening.